the Freethinkers at PSU. I want to welcome you tonight to this evening's lecture, Jesus, Easter Bunny, and Other Delusions, Just Say No. We're excited to have Dr. Boghossian speak for us this evening. In just a few minutes, Ryan Marquez will be introducing him. However, I did want to make a few announcements before we get started. When you came through the door, most of you received a ticket. That ticket is your ticket in and out. So if you do need to leave the hall for any reason and intend on coming back, please have that ticket ready, because due to space limitations, we want to make sure that everybody who was seated stays seated. See here. Please note that tonight's lecture is a public talk, and it's intended for folks with no formal training in philosophy. This is also the first time that Dr. Boghossian has given this talk. Dr. Boghossian's primary intellectual work, which he considers to be an extension of the Enlightenment Project, consists of bringing the tools of professional philosophers to a wide audience, like you. He refers to this as street epistemology, and you're going to soon experience this firsthand. We would like to thank Portland State for allowing this talk to go on. We respect the right of people to protest and complain about the material they don't want voiced. Everyone has that constitutional right. If the topic of tonight's lecture was why big oil is anti-American, or you two can fight back against big pharma, there wouldn't be any controversy. This just goes to show that matters of faith are still taboo. We need lectures like the one you're about to hear a lot more often. We need to break the taboo of critically discussing matters of faith. If everyone can take out their cell phones, please. Cell phones out. I know, kind of silly, right? If you would like to be put on Dr. Boghossian's mailing list and be informed of his other public lectures, seminars, debates with religious leaders, text the word delusion plus your email address to 22333. It's really important that you put delusion on it first so that it gets to his account. But delusion, your email address to the short number 22333. Note that your email will never be sold, distributed, you will never receive any spam. Your email address will only be used to communicate directly with you about Peter's talks, writings, debates, and other professional activities. After the lecture is over, we'll have a 5-minute intermission, and then we'll be reassembling for a Q&A. The microphone is located right there in the center of the room. Please be sure to speak clearly into the microphone, and please limit your question to about 20 seconds. Please make sure that you're addressing only material covered in tonight's lecture. If you have other questions regarding material, please feel free to email him. The email is pgb@pdx.edu, and for those of you who got a ticket, it's on there as well. Another new option we have for the evening is if you'd like to text your questions for this lecture to Dr. Boghossian, text "just say no," all one word, plus your question to the same number, 22333. You might not be able to get to every question. I have a feeling that we're going to have quite a few. But they will be answered probably in his next lecture, or they may, depending on the question, might actually be used as a topic for another lecture. So now that you've got your cell phones out, everybody turn them down. I don't want to hear any cell phones tonight. So that would be really cool. Thank you so much. There are t-shirts available in the front lobby for $20 a piece. We do take credit card, all 4 major ones: Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover. So feel free to stop by the table. The money goes to support lectures like this one, and so we can kind of get this message out there. When leaving the building this evening, please remember that this is a residential area. Should you need to smoke, please feel free, but please do it 25 feet from the entrance of the building. Please also remember that this is a residential area and there are dormitories really close. If you are smoking, please be mindful of the windows there so that the residents can have clean air as well. Without further ado, Ryan Marquez, graduating senior here at Portland State, will be introducing Dr. Boghossian. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy.
Samantha Scott, everyone. With a marvelous meta introduction. All right. All right. I'm Ryan Marquez of Portland State University Freethinkers, and thank you all for coming. It's great that you're able to share part of your evening with us. It means a lot. What a privileged position this is for me to be in, to be able to introduce such an instrumental figure in my intellectual development. I have had a rather long and dark history of personal delusions, dating all the way back to when I was forcibly indoctrinated into the Catholic Church as a small boy. While being a member of the Church, I was subjected to any number of both morally and metaphysically grotesque doctrines such as transubstantiation, unity of the Holy Spirit, vicarious redemption of sin, and the all-in-all hopeless inability of people to stand on their own 2 feet without leaning on some sort of grandiose supernatural father figure. But despite all of this, I still consider myself to be a very rational person. I think there are very few people you could talk to that would admit or say that I'm irrational. And that really brings us to, I think, the crux of the problem. See, without any sort of cognitive software to weed out the promising ideas from the bad ones, my brain became this sort of epistemic freight train that just kept chugging along the tracks, despite being derailed from any sort of higher understanding of anything, really. So I first met Dr. Boghossian in a critical thinking class, part of my knowledge, rationality, and understanding cluster here at the university. And I was immediately taken by both his candor and his tremendous level of enthusiasm. He actually attempted to convince the entire class of psychic phenomena via a series of in-class demonstrations to help illuminate the haste with which we make extreme explanatory leaps in trying to account for bizarre phenomena. And it worked for some people. Not going to drop any names. But at any rate, I quickly learned through his class that human beings are far from the walking embodiments of rationality that many Enlightenment thinkers would have, or did paint us as, rather. And I learned that if we want to have any hope of bringing our beliefs into a lawful alignment with reality, we need to be able to critically evaluate everything that we hold dear and be willing to jettison those beliefs if the evidence calls for it. And this should be held irrespective of how painful this process may be. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage the man who gave me the tools to become a true critical thinker, or at least push me in that direction. Please give a warm round of applause for my mentor, inspiration, and close personal friend, a man of unrestrained reason, Dr. Peter Boghossian.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming, and it's good to see so many friends and so many new people. First, I'd like to thank the Portland State University Freethinkers for allowing me this opportunity to speak tonight. Okay, thanks to Ryan for that very kind introduction, and thanks to Portland State University again for allowing me to speak. I know there's considerable controversy surrounding this talk. This is a full audience. All right, let's get right to it. My thesis tonight is simple and should be uncontroversial. Faith-based beliefs are not processes that are reliable. Let me repeat that. Faith-based belief processes are unreliable and will not lead one to the truth. Before I go on, I want to say a few preliminary comments. I am not a relativist. Relativism is the view that all points of view are equally valid and that all truth is relative to the individual. If you're a relativist and you've come here tonight, there's nothing I will say that will be persuasive to you. I also do not do meta-epistemology. This is not about meta-epistemology. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. Meta-epistemology is the study of knowledge. Exactly. Meta-epistemology affects about 200 people. My point, in a narrow area, my point is to address the remainder of humanity, a large percentage of whom are entrenched in faith-based beliefs. I am aware that there is an entire line of literature about meta-epistemology, and you can take my ethics class, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. Okay, the only word that you really need to know tonight, it's a philosopher word, it's a $2 word, is epistemic. It means of or related to knowledge and knowing. Of or related to knowledge or knowing. And finally, I want to say one other thing that perhaps may be a little surprising. I am completely willing to change my mind about anything in this talk, provided there's sufficient evidence to do so. All right, now let's return to my thesis. Faith-based processes are unreliable. Faith-based processes are unreliable. What do I mean by unreliable? I mean that they will decrease the likelihood that one will have true beliefs. They will decrease the likelihood that one will have true beliefs. I'm going to demonstrate this tonight by talking about various methods of reasoning. Okay, so let's think about this. Are there ways of solving problems? Are some ways of solving problems better than other ways of solving problems? Are some ways of solving problems better than other ways of solving problems? What do I mean by better? I mean that they will increase the likelihood that one will come to true beliefs. In order to answer this question, let's take a step back. Let's ask ourselves a very basic, simple question. Are there worse ways of reasoning? Are there worse ways of trying to figure out solutions to problems? Let's take a very, very simple example. The measurements of my bathroom door. For those of you who have come to my house, you can verify this. My bathroom door has a massive hole in it. I have no idea how the hole got there. I've always wanted to know, but it has a hole on it, and I've lived there for about 2 years. It truly is on my to-do list. Okay, so I need to figure out the measurements of the door, so that I can get a replacement door that will fit in the frame of the door. Pretty straightforward problem, pretty clear. Are there worse ways to figure out what the measurements of my door are? Yeah. Well, here's one. Ask my dog. Really? 2, divination. I'm going to take sticks, I'm going to scoop up some sticks from my backyard, I'm going to throw them up in the air, I'm going to see where they land, and I'm going to divine the answer from the sticks. It's a worse way of reasoning. Worse way of reasoning number 3. I want to figure out the measurements of my door are sacrifice a goat. Okay. Worked for the Aztecs. All right. Do people use worse ways of reasoning for themselves? Yeah, all the time. People use worse ways of conceptualizing and thinking through problems all the time. Here's one example of a worse way of thinking or a worse way of reasoning. People do this for themselves, and they also do this for their loved ones. This is an actual book. Okay. How do we know that astrology is unreliable? Well, the answer to this is the same for virtually every slide. We look at the evidence. You want to figure something out, you look at the evidence. Here's one piece of evidence. Sharon Carlson's A Double-Blind Test of Astrology. It was published in Nature in 1985. Had 116 people, gave them the California Personality Index, asked them the date, time, and place of their birth. And guess what? Astrologers matched, or attempted to match the birth date with the personality index. Do you think that they were successful? No. Some of them were, but no more so than random chance. Here's another worse way of reasoning. Homeopathy. What is homeopathy? Well, it's a highly, highly diluted substance that's used to treat illness. Just to be clear about what I mean by highly diluted, it contains no active ingredients whatsoever. Zipperino, none. If I were to urinate in the ocean, it would be more concentrated than a homeopathic sugar pill. And some people think that it's an herbal medicine. It's not an herbal medicine. This is fantastic. This is a homeopathy emergency kit. In case there's an emergency. Well, how do we know that homeopathy is unreliable? Well, the answer is simple. You look at the evidence. Here's one piece of evidence. Homeopathy for childhood and adolescent ailments. A systematic review of randomized clinical trials from the Mayo Clinic proceedings of 2007. The evidence for this is not just suggestive, but it's conclusive. It's overwhelming. It's an unreliable process. It is not effective. Here's another worse way of reasoning. Dowsing. You can douse for anything you want. You can douse for oil. You can douse for water. People have even tried to douse for elephants. Basically, here's what you do with dowsing. You have a stick in one hand, or a stick in two hands, two sticks, and then you walk around. Ooh, elephants, oil, look, dowsing for oil. And when the sticks cross, evidently that's the place that has the oil. Okay. But dowsing is unreliable. How do we know it's unreliable? Well, we examine the evidence. We look at the evidence. Here's just one piece of evidence. James Randi's An Encyclopedia of Claims, Frauds, Hoaxes, and the Occult and the Supernatural, published by St. Martin's Press in 1995. James Randi has been investigating these phenomena for decades, and he's a hero to many of us, myself included. He also offers $1 million, a $1 million prize, to anyone who can show, under proper observing conditions, evidence of any paranormal, supernatural, or occult power. Many have tried. No one has ever been successful. I will say that I'm willing to change my mind about this, provided sufficient evidence. And I always tell my students, what would it take to change your mind? Okay, what would it take to change my mind? Well, if they pass the James Randi test, that would be sufficient for me. Okay, so what can we tease out of these three examples? Astrology, homeopathy, and dowsing. Unreliable processes lead to unreliable conclusions. Unreliable processes lead to unreliable conclusions. That is, if the process one uses is unreliable, the conclusions one comes to cannot be relied upon. Cannot. For example, if one wants to cure an illness, an infection, with this homeopathic woo-woo, this will be the result. Nothing. Because it doesn't work. So let's take a look at the process of dowsing. Dowsing is unreliable. If the conclusion, think about this, the process of dowsing is me walking around trying to find dowsing. The conclusion is where the sticks cross. That's the conclusion. The process, the thing that got me there, is the actual act of dowsing. If the process that one uses to understand reality is not reliable, then every conclusion that springs from that process is also, let me hear it. Excellent. Unreliable. Think back to my bathroom door. If I use an unreliable process to ascertain the measurements of my door, there's a proliferation of answers to the question of how big the door should be. And virtually all of these answers will be incorrect. They'll be incorrect because the process that I used to get the measurements of my door was unreliable. Excellent. I use the word virtually because it's possible to use a bad process and get lucky. It's entirely possible. I could go outside, I could scoop up a number of sticks, I could throw them up. Lo and behold, it could be, it is possible, that I had scooped up exactly the number of sticks as is the height or width of the door. It's entirely possible. All right, at this juncture, we need to take a pause and think to ourselves, what are our epistemic goals? What are our goals knowledge-wise? We have twin goals. Every single person in here has two goals. The first is that we want to maximize the number of true beliefs that we have. We all want to have a maximum number of beliefs that were true. But if this is our only goal, then we could just believe everything we read, think, and hear. But our situation is far more complicated than this, because we have a second goal, that we want to minimize the number of false beliefs that we have. So we want to maximize the number of true beliefs, and we want to minimize the number of false beliefs. We want to have the fewest number of false beliefs possible, but again, this doesn't mean not believing anything, because that would mean we wouldn't have any true beliefs. Well, let's go revisit the example that we started off with, the bathroom door. We've established that there are bad ways to answer this question. By bad, I mean ways of thinking about this problem that will not enable me to figure out the measurements of a replacement door that will actually fit in the frame. To get the measurements of a door that will fit, I'll need to use a reliable process. Here are some examples of more reliable processes for my door. Number one, tape measure. Even I, the least mechanical person around, the least home repair guy, I have a tape measure. Take the tape measure, drag it to the top of the door, drag it to the bottom, put it in your iPhone, or if you still write it down. 2, Google. Maybe the door is a prefab door. Maybe it's from Home Depot or Lowe's and has some kind of number on it. 3, ask an expert. There's my expert right there. Very dear friend of mine and a contractor who's done fantastic work on our house, Rick June. Contrast this, for example, with someone who's never looked at the door and who won't look at the door. Is this guaranteed to work? No. One could always make a mistake. Your iPhone could auto-correct it. But again, think back to our twin epistemic goals. We want to decrease the number of false beliefs we have, and we want to increase the number of true beliefs that we have. To do this, we cannot use processes that are unreliable. So at this juncture, you've probably anticipated an obvious question. Are there any commonalities among processes that take one away from reality? Are there any commonalities among processes that take one away from reality? Processes that decrease the likelihood that the conclusion one comes to will be true? Well, yeah, there are 2. The first is that these processes are not based on evidence. Processes that take one away from reality are not based on evidence. The second commonality is that they're based upon what one thinks is evidence, but is not actually evidence. I term such ostensibly benign superstitious beliefs gateway beliefs. The Easter Bunny is an example of a conclusion for which certain epistemic agents, certain people, think that there's sufficient evidence. In a paper currently under peer review, I argue that starting out with seemingly inconsequential beliefs for which one lacks sufficient evidence may lay the framework for one to cognitively habituate oneself to lending one's belief to other propositions or other things which one also thinks that there's sufficient evidence, when no such evidence exists. Now we have finally set the groundwork to talk about faith. What is faith? Well, faith is belief without evidence. If one had evidence, one wouldn't need faith. Usually one refers to this as particularly salient with matters of divine importance, matters of supreme importance. Faith is unreliable. Faith is an unreliable process. It will not point one in the direction of the truth. To demonstrate this, I will make several factual statements. And I think that every single person in here will agree with what I'm going to say. 1, there are various faith traditions. There are different faith traditions. 2, people sincerely believe their faith tradition. It seems incredibly uncontroversial. People have sincere beliefs that their faith tradition is true. They accept as true those propositions in their faith tradition. 3, competing claims. Faith traditions make competing claims. Here's one very simple example. Muslims believe that Muhammad was the last prophet. Mormons believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet. But let's look at the dates. The dates don't line up. And that's from Surah 33:40. They cannot both be true. It cannot both be the case that Muhammad is the last prophet and that Joseph Smith is a prophet. Someone born after him was a prophet. These things cannot all be true. It's possible, however, that they can all be false. In fact, almost all claims, or all of them, must be false. But I'm not just going to claim they're false tonight. I'm going to claim that they're delusions. What do I mean by a delusion? Delusions have three criteria. This is from Karl Jaspers, psychiatrist and philosopher. We're going to spend a minute on these. Certainty, incorrigibility, and implausibility. Certainty. People are positive that it's true. Incorrigibility, an ability to revise a belief. And the more of this literature that I look into, I'm beginning to think that this is absolutely the most important of the three. And implausibility, bizarreness. Is the belief bizarre? I want to say briefly that the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the main purpose of the DSM is to provide common terms and standard criteria for classifying mental disorders. The DSM grants religious exemptions to delusions. I disagree with granting religious delusion as an exemption, and I want to mention there's a budding young scholar here at Portland State University, Renee Barnett, who's working to eliminate the exemption from religious delusion from the DSM, and I'm helping her to do so. Thank you. That said, if a belief, regardless of the content, meets the three criteria, we are forced to conclude that a tremendous number of people are delusional. There's no other conclusion one can draw from the premises I've just outlined. And because the belief is shared doesn't make it any less delusional. If everyone believes there's an alien in the courtyard, and then they convince Sue that there's an alien in the courtyard, that doesn't increase the likelihood that there's an actual alien in the courtyard. Each additional person who shares the belief that there's an alien in the courtyard does not make the belief more likely to be true. But one of the things that's interesting about this is that this doesn't deter people. It doesn't deter them from coming to understand that they're delusional. In fact, not at all. They'll always claim others are delusional. He's delusional. All those people over there, they're delusional. Not me. I am definitely not delusional. My beliefs are in perfect alignment with reality. Okay. There are three core reasons for why one believes one's faith tradition is true. Now, I've been teaching, I've taught over 33,000 people for 22 years. I take this both from my experience and from the literature. Reason number one, miracles. We're going to examine a few miracles. Catholics believe that the communion wafer, this is official church doctrine, is the literal, physical body of Christ. It's called the doctrine of transubstantiation. I actually heard Ryan mention it in the intro. This is the physical body of Christ that gets transformed from the wafer into flesh that they then eat. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Speaking in tongues. Pentecostals believe that they can speak in tongues. They get this notion from 1 Corinthians 12. Yep. It's amazing. They always sound like Italian. It sounds like Italian. Faith healing is another one. Christian Scientists participate in this. The basic idea of faith healing is that through your love of Jesus Christ, someone will come and lay hands on you, and then whatever incurable illness that you have will vaporize, or who knows. I never understood it. Okay. So let's take a look back at the three things that we discussed before. certainty, incorrigibility, and implausibility. Does one hold this belief with certainty? Well, I don't know. I have no idea. You'd have to ask somebody. You'd have to ask someone, are you certain that this transforms from a wafer into a physical body? Yes, I am certain. Okay, cha-ching. Incorrigibility. Are you willing to revise your belief? Are you willing to revise that belief? And again, this is a case-by-case basis. I certainly can't say overall, but in my experience, most people to this, they would say no. Implausibility or bizarreness. Is it bizarre that someone believes that they can make utterances in a dead language that they have had no exposure to? Cha-ching! These are all testable claims. They're testable. We can use the tools of science to figure these things out. Spoiler alert, false. They've all been shown to be false. Once one makes a judgment of a supernatural phenomena, those things in the phenomenal, in this world, they leave a footprint that then open us up to use the tools of science and reason to look at these things. They're testable and measurable. Let's take a look at a Catholic belief. Intercessory prayer. That's the idea of one person can pray for another person and then somehow the act of praying will heal the person. Well, we've actually tested that. The largest study ever, the Harvard Prayer Study in 2006, tested that. They looked at 1,802 bypass surgery patients. They found that prayer had no effect on recovery from surgery. Prayer is not effective. It is interesting that so few people have heard of this study. It's not received even anywhere near the publicity that it should have received. But what about speaking in tongues? What about speaking in tongues? Well, it's language-like, but it's not a language. Nichols, who has decades of experience investigating these sorts of claims, he's the senior research fellow for the Committee of Skeptical Inquiry. He wrote a great little piece that you should read, Looking for a Miracle, Weeping Icons, Relics, Stigmata, Visions, and Healing Cures. Speaking in tongues is gibberish. It's nonsense. But here's what I find really interesting about this whole thing. All of these things are delusions. They're all delusions. Each person views the other person's faith belief as a delusion. The Pentecostal who believes she can speak in tongues views the Catholic's belief that a wafer is literally transformed into the physical body of Christ as a delusion, and vice versa. Or the idea that Muhammad rode to heaven on a winged horse. That's in Surah 17:1. If one belongs to a faith tradition, one can and should scrutinize one's faith with the same tools of reason and by the same standards used to evaluate and reject other faiths. But people don't. Why would one not see one's faith delusions as delusions? Yet easily see other faiths as delusions. There are many reasons for this. We can take a look at cognitive neuroscientists, psychology, philosophy. All right, but we'll pause and move to the second reason people have for claiming that their faith tradition is true. Conviction. Conviction. But conviction is evidence of nothing but conviction. Conviction is evidence of nothing but conviction. One's unshakable belief that one can see Christ or Zeus or the Emperor of Japan working in one's life is not evidence that the belief is true. This is evidence of nothing except the fact that one happens to believe whatever it is that one thinks one believes. This is part of the delusion. One's conviction is evidence of the strength of the delusion and not evidence for the truth of the delusion. Confidence does not map on to accuracy. Third reason, inerrant. Everyone thinks their particular faith tradition is inerrant. Inerrant, perfect, can't be improved upon. I want to take a moment right now to talk about this. Let's take a look at just a quick way that one can think critically about these things. Let's say I want to look at, are the prophecies in the Bible true? We already established that there are bad ways to do this and good ways. There are bad ways to think about problems. Here's a bad way to think about the problem. Go out and read only those books that already agree with the conclusions that you've come to. It's called confirmation bias. It's called confirmation bias. And as I read more and more about this in my career, I'm becoming convinced that this is an extremely important issue that needs to be dealt with. Here is a much better way to think about the problem. I want to figure out if the prophecies in the Bible are true. Here's what I should do. If you want to read someone who says the prophecies are true, that's fantastic. That's what you should do. Go out and read, I don't know, Josh McDowell, or read, so take Josh McDowell. Go out and read Josh McDowell. Okay. But then people stop there. Don't stop there. That's just the beginning of what you need to do. The next thing what you need to do is you need to read people on the other side, like Bart Ehrman or Richard Carrier or any of these people. You need to read people who have beliefs that don't agree with the conclusion that you started with. That's an investigation. That's what an inquiry is. But again, don't stop there. Don't stop there. Go back then to the original source material and see how Josh McDowell responded to those criticisms. Then you are engaged in a process of trying to find out what the truth is. That's a way to think about the problem. And I admit, it's a tremendous amount of intellectual work. It takes time, to be sure. No question about it. So where does this leave us? Where are we now? Well, there's an inevitable trajectory here. There's an inevitable trajectory. Almost every conversation, people want to talk to me about this constantly. Listen, unfortunately not enough science fiction, but people want to talk to me about this constantly. Here's the trajectory of the conversation. Invariably, it starts off, my faith is true. After about, I don't know, depends on the person, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something really interesting will happen. The conversation will go from, my belief is true, and it won't be a clear demarcation. It won't be like an acknowledgement, well, you know, I guess I thought this, but it's not correct. No, from my faith is true, my belief is true, to my faith is beneficial. Well, my Uncle George plays poker with the guys at church and he likes it, or this is the inevitable trajectory of every single conversation. Period. But I'm sticking with my thesis tonight, and I am not going to allow the Q&A to be held hostage by people who want to do a fast trick and try to claim that it's beneficial. My thesis is that it's an unreliable process that will not lead you to the truth. But I have a prediction. I have actually two predictions for you. My first prediction is, in spite of me having spent like 3 minutes on this, people are still going to go up to the mic and tell me how it's benefited them. I have another prediction. That in spite of the fact that everybody knows my prediction ahead of time, it's not going to stop it. The most charitable thing that we can say about faith, the most charitable thing, is that it's likely to be false. Faith does not make you a better person. My lack of faith in Jesus does not make me a bad person. It doesn't make me a good person either. Your faith in Jesus does not make you a good person or a bad person. Faith does not make you a better person. Faith is just an unreliable process. That's all it is. This has nothing to do with being a better person or not. So what? Okay, so what? Where are we left now? Well, if you don't already use faith as a process to navigate reality, I have an incredibly simple piece of advice for you. It couldn't possibly be any simpler. When you do engage people of faith, be honest, blunt, direct, and truthful. Give them the same reciprocity in which they engage you. I always go out of my way to talk to the guy who screams or the people in the park. I think it's great. And they're always very honest with me, and I treat them with the same thing in kind. It's true. I also want to say that it's really important that you ought to model the behavior that you would like to see in others. Specifically the idea that you're willing to reconsider. I'm always open to think that someone knows something I don't know. If someone knows something I don't know, I want to know it because I want to lawfully align my beliefs with reality. But don't just stop there. Tell them about the advantages of reason and rationality. Don't leave them in the cold. Reason and evidence can replace faith. Reason and evidence can replace faith. If you have faith-based beliefs, thank you for coming. Tonight is an opportunity for you to jettison your faith. You can do that right here, right now. You can say no to faith. Whether it's something as simple as my bathroom door, or it's larger questions of ultimate concern. You can use a process that will increase the likelihood that you'll come to truth, that you'll have true beliefs. It's a process. Nobody's mad at you. Nobody's upset that you used a process to know reality that isn't reliable. It's not a matter of shame or blame. It's a matter of lawfully aligning your beliefs with reality by using a process that will take you there. Here's your first step. I mean, first step on the journey tonight to leave your faith right here tonight. The first thing you need to do is to admit that there are things that you don't know. Even doing this will tremendously advance your epistemic situation. I don't know what happens to me after I die. I think my suspicion is that because the neurons in my brain stop firing, that there'll be no more me, just oblivion, just like before I was born. But I don't know that. As a skeptic, I'm not dogmatic about it. I'm open to evidence to the contrary. And to be sure, no question about it, it will be scary. No question about it. But there are community resources to help you. There are. Nobody's left alone. There's the Free Thinkers of Portland State University who put on this talk. There are meetups. My friend Bernie is here. I saw him tonight. Where are you, Bernie? Raise your hand. Talk to Bernie at the end. There's the Center for Inquiry.net. There's Skeptics in the Pub. You can move beyond faith and replace it with a simple rule. Couldn't be any easier. I'm going to proportion my beliefs to the evidence. I'm going to proportion my beliefs to the evidence. Carl Sagan said it best. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. It doesn't take faith to say, I don't know. It takes humility. If you want to align your beliefs with the truth and embrace reason, then you can say no. Tonight really is a genuine opportunity for you to live a life free of delusion. Thanks.
We're going to get started here as soon as Dr. Boghossian is ready. Please remember to keep your comments to 20 seconds or less. We will unfortunately need to cut you off so that we can get through as many questions as we have this evening. So again, please, 20 seconds or less. With no further ado, give me just one moment to get the microphone going, and looks like we're ready. If you'd like to go ahead with your first question, Dr. Boghossian.
And am I on? Can everybody hear that? Hear that? If you could say your first name too, is that on?
I'm Vern.
Did you invite me to your house for dinner?
I did.
Can I just...
No, actually I didn't, because it's not very neat, but I invited you to Olive Garden.
Okay. I just want to say before you go, if you'll allow me this, so this is a great example right now. Vern and I can guarantee you, have genuine differences, to say the least, about reality. He is a kind person. He is a good person. He invited my whole family out to dinner. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Anyway.
Thank you for that, Peter. And I'll try to keep the 20 seconds. Peter, if you'd been born 400 years ago, you'd probably be one of my heroes of history, because you would have been one of the people burned at the stake for denying the doctrine of transubstantiation. There were many who were burned in England and lost their heads. So you could have been one of my heroes of faith if you'd been born several centuries ago.
Wow.
We do have a response event in 2 weeks. If you haven't gotten one of these, if you're interested, there are probably several wadded up on the floor that people didn't want. My question is this.
Sure.
After you gave your talk on November 17th, I gave you a picture, the cartoon, but at the bottom it mentioned the professor at MIT that wrote the article about the very improbable agreement of how mathematics can agree with the physical world. My question to you is this: do you now, or do you intend to include that in your philosophy classes as a metaphysical evidence? If not, I think it's not an honest presentation.
Okay, that's fair. Thanks for your question. My first admission is, you'll have to forgive me, at that night I was exhausted with no water. I have not read it yet. I will say, with total sincerity, and you can ask my students who are here now in my classes, all of my ex-students are here, I bring people in on both sides of the issue with great frequency. We just had my philosophy of education class. My friend Steve, who's here, Dr. Steve is going to come. I had Rob Kramer, who's pretty much as conservative as it gets, and we're going to have a liberal come in to the class too. So I really do my best to balance issues in terms of political issues. So, but if it does constitute sufficient evidence, I'm happy to take a look at it. But my very candid admission is, I'm sorry, I have not looked at it yet. My plate's been full, but I give you my word, for sure I will get to that. Full disclosure, I know this. I know this man. My son is at his house right now.
Please remember again to keep it confined to the content of this lecture.
That applies to me too. Okay.
Yeah. I'm Craig. You know I'm a devout practicing atheist. And as a scientist, of course, I think the universe is pointless. But in the 16th century, the fact was that when you dropped a ball from a tower, it fell in a straight line.
Right.
And when Galileo said the Earth rotated, people said the ball should curve as it goes down. So the Church was, in fact, more rational than Galileo. He held what was considered delusional idea at the time. In science, it's the truth is what you can convince the majority of. So what notion of truth do you follow? Is it constructivist? Is it inflationary?
It's certainly not constructivist. So let's take a step back and take a look at that. The way science works is we try to disprove our hypotheses, not to try to prove them. The scientific process itself is about disproving hypotheses. You don't go to a scientific discussion with an idea that you're certain that you know how the world is. That's the job description of a priest. Speechless.
Yeah,
Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. Let me just rotate through because we have a lot of people here.
All right. Yeah,
thanks, Craig.
Truth. There's so many ways that people see truth. There's at least 4 major ways that people define it, and some of them are overlapping. But science is.
And I think, do you buy the idea that there are worse ways to solve problems?
Sure.
Okay.
But truth has no evolutionary adaptive function.
I bet you should read Steven Pinker's work. I beg to differ. Yeah. But we'll have that conversation.
There's no evolutionary advantage in knowing whether something's a mirage or whether it's real.
That's actually untrue. Again, well, for that, here's what you should read. You should read Shermer, anything by Shermer. The Believing Brain is great. You can watch his 2 TED Talks, which are fantastic. And he talks about the evolutionary advantage of believing that there's a tiger in the bush when there is no tiger in the bush. These things confer advantages, and they then become embedded in our cognitive architecture in our brains. And so we go through with the same architecture and we know the world, and that's one of the reasons that we make mistakes. And Carl Sagan talks about that, of knowing one of the important things to do is know the limits, your fallibility, the limits of your humanity.
We have evolved to be not rational. Rationality doesn't serve a great function.
I'm going to go ahead and interject here. It turns out we do have some other people waiting in line. I have heard out you better served emailing Dr. Boghossian and continuing that discussion.
Hi, I'm Bob.
Bob?
Bob. Yeah,
Hi,
I'm not
Bob.
a person of faith, but I know the joy of Santa Claus.
Okay.
And, I really kind of wrestled with the idea of teaching my children about Santa Claus. And I don't know if my wife is a better arguer than I am, but she made the case that Santa Claus was as much a gateway to atheism as he is to faith. He's godlike to me. He's this guy who can do magical things. My children are constantly pestering me with questions about what Santa can and can't do. Can he read my mind? So her argument was that, Santa Claus is something that we believed in as children, and then as we get older, we realize that these claims are not provable, and therefore we stop believing in Santa Claus, and so that helps them either path.
Can I'm a dad, I have 2 kids. I will say that I'm in no position whatsoever to give you parental advice, but can I tell you how I navigate that tricky slope with my wife? I refused adamantly to tell my kids about Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, or the Easter Bunny. And one thing is for sure, if they ask me a question, I'm not going to lie to them. I'm certainly not going to ruin or corrupt their epistemic realm. It's just not going to happen. But that's my relationship with my children. My wife can tell them that the moon is made of green cheese. So I'm just saying that is a possible answer to the dilemma in terms of I'm here giving marital advice to you.
Yeah, I just give the question back to my kids, is typically what I do. Do you think Santa Claus can read your mind? And then my son says no, and I say, well, that seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a little hesitant to offer you parenting advice, but be honest, direct, and blunt with your kids. Anything else is an ideology, self-esteem, all that stuff. It's all nonsense. But
That's good enough for me.
Thanks.
Hi there. I'm Anthony, a student here.
What's your name again?
Anthony.
Thanks for coming, Anthony.
And thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thanks, man.
And I'm really gunning to change your mind in 20 seconds about something.
Oh,
See if I
great,
can do
great.
this.
Then I just want to say, then I will be indebted to you.
Great. So you made the claim that faith is belief without evidence, and I would suggest, no, faith is belief invested in a conclusion. Now,
Why would you say that?
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
You said unreliable processes lead to unreliable
That is
conclusions.
correct.
And reasoning is an unreliable process.
What
If
is
I were
an
to ask
wait a second.
100
Stop. What is an unreliable process?
Reasoning. You see, and
Why
I'll give
is
you an
that?
example. Let's
Yeah.
look at the evidence. Were I to ask 100 people, who should we vote for in the next election? Each of them would employ reasoning. The equally intelligent people, same exact information available to them, and they'll give me 100 different ways that they come to whatever different conclusions that they might have.
Okay.
And so based on this, you see, faith is actually the belief that we invest in the conclusions that we come to because each of them think that they're correct. They have faith.
Wait a second. Wait. You got to really slow down and unpack. You just threw a tremendous amount of stuff.
20 seconds.
I know. I'm sorry about that. I know. I really did try to get as many people as I can, and so.
So again,
But how does that conclusion follow from the premises? That's the thing I'm not clear about. Maybe I'm just not getting it. I don't know.
So reasoning itself is an unreliable process.
Yeah. Well, I don't get that.
Each person, the way that they process information and come to a conclusion. How do we solve
But
world
that
hunger?
presupposes they have perfect knowledge. I'm talking about the process of reasoning, not in individuals.
Nobody has perfect knowledge. So what we have available to us to problem solve, which you've touted here, is reason.
No. Hold on. Step way back. So I'm the worst person in the world to figure out how to even change the oil in my car. It's just not going to happen. That's why we have Google and Jiffy Lube. So for me to try to figure something like that out, the limitation isn't reason itself. It's my knowledge and experience. Plato, for example, says that when people reason through problems, and when I do my work in prisons, I talk to prisoners and I teach critical thinking. As a rule, prison inmates will think they're awesome at reasoning.
And you made my point precisely.
Yeah.
Since we have imperfect information available to us at all times, what we do have is the best of our ability to reason. And we have to invest faith in that.
No, you don't. That's an illegitimate move. But what you have to do is you have to do the best you can to reason through problems.
And do you believe the conclusion that you come to?
Hold on 1 second.
Because on what basis?
Hold on 1 second. And you have to be more humble when you claim to know something. And one more thing, we all assign confidence values to the beliefs that we have.
Exactly.
We ought to be more humble and assign lower...
There's a very high confidence value attached to that statement up there.
That's right.
I'm just very high confidence level.
That's right.
And on what basis? There's an amount of faith
the basis
you've invested in your conclusion.
The 34-minute presentation.
So, thank you.
Again, for questions like these or comments like these, you can go to the public Instagram. Again, that's pgb@pdx.edu.
What's your name?
I'm David. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm in a difficult position being both a scientist and a religious person.
Okay.
But one point of order,
Sure.
because I don't know if I understand your position. Are you saying that all non-scientific beliefs should be jettisoned? In which case, where does that leave us with literature, poetry, philosophy?
No, great question.
And more
Great
of the
question.
point, I can read Yeats, and Yeats will not help me measure my bathroom door.
You are correct.
But did I get anything true from reading Yeats?
That's a great question. Okay, thanks for the question. Okay. I have, for my breakfast, on any normal day, would cause a person who saw what I ate to go into shock. This morning, I had about 12 pieces of Costco thick-stripped bacon. 3 eggs and then the leftover egg from yesterday, and a little bit of spinach fried in the bacon grease from Costco. Paleolithic. All right. These things are subjective. What I like to eat, it is a subjective thing. When I don't listen to, I'm not a big poetry fellow, but I do like heavy metal. That is a subjective, extra credit. That's a subjective thing that I'm not making an objective claim about the world. The things that I talked about tonight, miracles, speaking in tongues, faith healing, intercessory prayer, all of those phenomena are objective claims about the world. Let me just finish because we need to tease this out.
And so subjective things
Wait a second, please let me finish because you asked me a question. I really want to give you a detail. I don't want to leave something hanging out there, okay? So there's a difference between a subjective phenomena and an objective phenomena. I have no problem if somebody tells me that they like ketchup on their hot dog and somebody else tells me that they hate ketchup, or someone likes, I don't know, like Two Live Crew or something. Those are I don't know where that came from. These are subjective phenomena which are different from making a claim about the world, which then, by the way, oftentimes influence public policy. Okay.
But you're saying, but clarification, I'm not arguing.
Sure.
You're saying, though, that subjective things like poetry and literature can't contain truth.
It depends that was kind of Craig's question.
It depends meaning it can contain truth.
It depends, well, wait a second.
It can't be depends.
It depends what you mean by truth.
What?
I mean, it's my subjective experience. It's my subjective experience.
Do you believe that true things can exist as subjective truths?
That's a misuse of the word truth. That's an equivocation on the word truth.
Well, I mean, there's no scientific definition of truth. So truth is a concept in philosophy, not in science. I mean,
I'm losing you here. So the question is what? Can
subjective things like literature contain truth? The way you're using it here.
Here's the thing. So here's the thing. So we have phenomena. Phenomena come to us: senses, eating, listening, hearing, and I have an experience of those things in the world. I would not put the belief truth on the things that I have. I would not put the label truth on that. I would say this is my experience. I happen to love Costco thick strip bacon and eggs every morning. I'm not saying you should love it. I'm not mandating it. It's not going to go into public policy. I'm not even saying it's true. I'm saying that this is, when I eat this, I enjoy it. It is a subjective state.
Well, would you say that it's a factual statement? So,
Well, yeah, I mean, if you read The Moral Landscape by Sam Harris, he talks about that having tinnitus in his ear. It can be a subjective state and an objective state. Thanks.
okay, thank you.
My name is Marek Perkowski, and I teach quantum computing and artificial intelligence. I am a scientist. I met you already several times, and several times you repeat the same stuff. I didn't learn anything new today. In the first meeting, you have
I will assume that's not a problem with your understanding.
Maybe it is, okay? So my question is the following.
Yeah.
In the first meeting, I tried to show you some different point of view using the notions of quantum mechanics. I can talk about many theories like anthropic principle, Big Bang, and so on. We have no time in 20 seconds, right? In any case, if you look to the papers, even by atheists like Hitchens or Michael Shermer, they tell that the question whether God exists or not is an unsolvable problem. It is not possible for a believer to convince mathematically or physically somebody that God exists. Similarly, for atheists, it is not possible to prove that God does not exist.
Okay, does this pertain directly to...
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does, okay? So, my question is,
Yeah.
when I wanted to discuss this issue with you detailedly, I even volunteered to spend my time and teach you quantum mechanics. You told, yes, I will come, then you refused. Then I created especially the web page discussing your ideas, and everybody is welcome. Information is here. I invited you to participate in this. You refused. Some other people like Rob Singleton come, and I have great discussion. Yeah. Next, I came to your class, and you asked me to leave. Where is the freedom? Okay, so my question, one moment, okay? So my question is, will you allow me to sit in your class? I am over 65, I will pay $25. If you will sign just your name in one place, I will sit in your class. Do you agree with this?
How does that answer the question, is faith a reliable process to guide one to the truth? Can you answer that question?
No, because it's different.
Okay, well then you have your answer. My prediction is almost true.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Will you allow me to sit in your class? You see, this is typical for Peter. He avoids answering question. He goes to another topic.
I'm in that class and I don't want to.
Okay.
Hey, by the way, before you go, I just want to say that those sorts of things are rare in these things, and they're particularly rare among religious people. That really doesn't happen. Most people have dialogues that are incredibly civil, and I would suggest to people who feel otherwise that they should read 1 Peter 3:15, if you're a Christian, the idea that if you're asked about your hope, you should give evidence for that and testimony, but you should do so with gentleness and respect. All right.
Okay, I'm Kevin. So I'm asking this question as an atheist, so you might not like how hypothetical it is, but suppose I tell you that religion X has turned my life around, that it's beneficial. Why should I care that whether it's true or not?
I'm trying to think if that violates the condition.
Yeah, it is right on the line, isn't it?
Yeah, it is kind of on the line. I'm hoping that my prediction is going to come true tonight, but if not, that's good. I would have gone out of here and learned something, that it's possible to have this discussion without making that second move. So why should you care? So if you have faith, but you don't believe it's true, but it makes you feel good, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Or we have different ideas about truth.
I don't
really defined what
here's my take. I don't know if this answer is going to satisfy you, but again, to quote Sam Harris, I'm not sure if it's possible that one can believe something one knows is false. I don't know. Usually there's some kind of a correspondence between what you believe and reality. I will say that I'll tell you how I could be wrong. I had a class, if anybody was in this class, raise their hand, I'd appreciate that. I had were you in this class? You know what I'm saying? So I had a class with somebody who literally shattered my conception of reality. I do this little section of the class where I give people an opportunity to air their superstitions. And somebody had the belief that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and usually I give people 5, but for him I gave him 45 minutes. Was anybody in that class? Oh wow, a bunch of people. All right, so you can... Okay. Somebody else in the class asked him, well, what about the Neanderthals? How do you explain that? He was a strict fundamentalist. And he said something that just blew me away, like floored, flabbergasted. He said, I choose not to believe in the Neanderthals. And it was the first time in my life that I ever seriously, profoundly questioned the idea that somebody can... I mean, how do you choose? I mean, I understand what confirmation bias is. You know, you can pick a subject. But that was fascinating. So to answer your question, I don't really know. That's one of those Wittgensteinian answers. That, you know, I'm sorry if that didn't answer it. I mean, I'm still working through that question myself.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Hello. My name is Ben. First, I want to thank you for this, doing this lecture. I think it's far too appropriate for the modern age. My question is, in this overly political climate that we have now, I hear the word blowback being tossed around a lot, and usually it's referred to, you know, terrorist response towards aggression and stuff like that. But my question is, we have a lot of subjective beliefs that are really ingrained into our culture. And is there blowback from that?
Oh, what an awesome, that is $1 million question. Yeah, it's a toxin and it's killing us. So I'll tell you how I interpret your question, and then you tell me if this is the correct interpretation. So we've had this subjective, I wrote a paper about this, we've had this subjective turn in our society, this idea that I forget the fellow's name, I think it was Anthony. Things are just true for me, they're not true for you. It's a subjective turn where we privilege subjectivity over an objectively knowable world. That manifests itself in every conceivable thing that one can possibly think of. It manifests itself in, and I gave a Philosophy News podcast and I talked about this, how that move towards subjectivity has allowed alternative truths to enter into the discourse. And again, I think we need to be very, very clear about 2 things. One, which I talked about before, the difference between subjective things and the difference between objective things. And 2, criticisms or critiques of these ideas, if one has a criticism of these ideas, they're not criticisms of people. Criticisms of ideas are not criticisms of people. People demand dignity. Ideas don't demand dignity. So one thing we see happen is when people attack these subjective notions, then people get offended, they wave the card, they tell you they want you to be fired or not talk. I think that the problem of a society that's moved to a subjective turn is incredibly damaging to us. And it manifests itself in virtually every arena. And in my philosophy of education class, we talk about how it manifests itself in pedagogy and educational practices. My mentor, who's 95 years old, is here, Professor Emeritus from PSU, Frank Wesley. He's nodding his head. We've had many a late night discussion about that. Thanks.
All right. Well, you're welcome.
Good evening, Professor.
You can call me Peter.
Now, let's pretend there exists...
What's your name first?
Matt.
Matt.
Let's pretend there exists something I'm concerned, which may be a delusion.
Okay.
But it kind of sounds good.
Okay. Like the fact that you see the Seinfeld episode with the ice cream that they claimed it to be low calorie or low fat, and it was like not like that.
Right. What sort of standard of evidence or tools or tricks would you suggest to help me tease out exactly what's going on? I want to figure out whether something's a delusion or not. What can I trust? How can I start?
$1 million question. Awesome question. Here's the quick response, and then we can play with this a little bit. The first thing you need to do is you have to ask yourself, am I willing to revise that belief? And then you have to always be prepared with everything. Am I echoing here? Only in my own head. Subjective versus objective. That'd be a great example, by the way, subjective versus objective. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, I'm sorry, I lost. Okay, let me just back up and say one thing. I lost my hearing in my left ear about 2 years ago. I woke up, it's a totally true story, I wasn't doing anything crazy. I woke up deaf one day in my left ear, and I found out that I had sudden idiopathic unilateral hearing loss, which means you can't hear in one ear. And so I'm always hearing a slight buzz in my left ear, and I'm never really sure if that buzz is external or internal. So repeat your question one more time, because my tinnitus is acting up.
Are there any tips or tricks you could give me to figure out whether something's a delusion or not, where to start? Yeah, okay. Here's one thing you can do. You can ask yourself, am I willing to revise the belief? And then you can ask yourself this. Watch how I word, listen to how I word this question. What evidence would it take me to not believe that? Like, what evidence could somebody bring to me that would disabuse me of this notion? Here's another thing that's a great trick that you can use right off the bat. Just ask yourself, how could I be wrong about that? Not I am wrong, but not how am I wrong, but how could I be wrong? What conditions would have to hold before I was wrong about that? But the core answer to your question is this idea of a willingness to revise. In philosophy, we call this doxastic closure. One gets epistemically stuck. You get just stuck in these notions. And as long as you keep that in mind, look, here's a basic example. What evidence would it take you to believe that the world is not as it appears? You know, like that, he's really an alien and she's from Venus or something, or, she's a robot. What evidence would it take for you? Some sort of picture or videotape or lens.
Yeah, you see the movie The Matrix? Okay. So your imagining of that could be a first step in you understanding a belief structure that you have. Many times people can't tell you how their beliefs could be wrong. So I would think, that's how I'd answer it. All right, thanks.
Hello. I'm Brian.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. I'm an educator, and one of my biggest concerns as an educator is to make sure that students come away with the ability to think critically. And
great. Thank you.
You're welcome. My main concern is that, so I've had plenty of conversations with people who are sincerely faithful, and no matter what you say, no matter how much evidence you throw at them, you're just not going to change their minds.
I'm sorry, I have to pause you about one thing. K through 12? Or?
Yes, K-12.
Okay, that's much more complicated. Private or public?
And I'm sorry?
Private or public?
Public. Yeah, it's yes, I've had these problems before.
Okay.
But, well, I mean, you can, I would say, let's generalize this for the audience as anybody who's in this situation, talking to anybody of faith, or, well, any human being overall. Yeah. So I've accepted the fact that a lot of times with the truly faithful, you're not going to change their minds. I
don't believe that.
Okay.
I don't believe that. There are people I've seen tonight who have come into my class as fundamentalist something, and they've freed themselves from mental slavery. Anybody can do it.
Okay, and actually I'll take that as given, because yes, there are people who do go from being religious to becoming atheists or whatever else. But nonetheless, what I'm concerned with here is those who actually have either been abused by science or who have pseudoscientific beliefs. So let's say examples from like the victims of the Tuskegee experiments to people who believe in crap like anti-vaccine movements and 9/11 conspiracies. A lot of them will actually throw, seemingly scientific or fact-based evidence at you. And a lot of times it seems a lot more difficult to approach them than it is to approach a faithful believer in some sort of religion. And I was just wondering how you approach those situations.
I'll tell you how I do it, but I think that it really does depend on people's styles of teaching. I'd also be super, super careful about doing anything because you want to keep your job, and
Certainly.
in the K through 12 arena, that's dangerous. That's throwing dynamite out there. That's why, by the way, I just want to say parenthetically that the philosophy department here at PSU is doing these community engagement programs where we go into the schools and teach critical thinking. And the resistance that we're getting on that is incredible, because to really think critically about something, you have to, this is the subjectivity question, there has to be a possibility that certain people are wrong. If knowledge is to mean anything, certain people have to be wrong. So the question, to answer your question directly, here's the bottom line. I've never seen this in any critical thinking textbook. I've seen this in the literature, but people don't teach it. If you look at the American Philosophical Association, in 1990, they wrote this thing called the Delphi Report. I don't want to be overly technical, but it basically breaks critical thinking down into two poles. One is a skill set, and the other is an attitude. And almost always, people teach the skill set. But the skill set is worthless unless you have the attitude. So what I try to do, and this is the main focus of my teaching in those disciplines, is I try to model the belief that I want others. I want to emulate the belief. In the education literature, this is called pro-social modeling. So I will almost invariably thank people when they come and they correct a belief. I'll just give you a very, very quick story. I was in a prisons teaching once. I will use a bad word just to warn everybody. I had a prisoner the first day of this critical thinking class. He was a big guy. He walked right up to my face, and he had a dictionary in his hand. I mean, he really was a huge guy, and he got right in my face and he said, "Do you know what a bunghole is? Do you know what a bunghole is?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, I do know what a bunghole is." And he said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "It's an asshole." He said, "No, you're wrong." And sure enough, he whipped open the dictionary, he had it bookmarked and highlighted, and he pointed to it. A bunghole is a tap on a keg of beer. And I said, "That is awesome. I have learned something today." So I tried to model that behavior and not become doxastically stuck or epistemically closed in my belief system. I'm sorry it was a long answer, but it's very difficult to teach that and assess that sort of thing. There's no outcome assessment on that. But that would be my number one piece of advice to you. Try to model the behavior you want. Read that little thing in Freakonomics. If you want your kids to read, don't read to them, have them see you read. This idea of pro-social modeling. All right, a couple more and then we'll rock and roll. Thanks for your question, man.
Hi, my name is Joel. I enjoyed the lecture.
Hey, Joel. Thanks for coming.
I'm curious if when you're one-on-one with a religious person and you're trying to change their mind, do you have a specific argument?
I don't try to change their mind.
Okay. So you're okay with religious people being religious?
Okay, well, first of all, I tried the best that I could to not talk about religion. Okay, so talking about religion, in my opinion, is always a mistake. One of my colleagues talked to me about this. When you talk to somebody about religion, you're talking to them about where their kids go to school or bar mitzvah, or you're talking about hymns and songs and dipping. There's too much emotional valence there. But when you talk about faith, you're extirpating the root of the toxin. So I prefer to keep these questions about faith. And the second thing that I just like to say about that is, I genuinely do think, and I don't know, but maybe it's just the way I'm wired, I really do think that maybe this guy really does know something I don't know. So, you know, in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Covey says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So I will ask people a tremendous number of questions until I have an excellent idea, not of the conclusions that they have, but of why they think that the processes that got them to the conclusions are reliable. Then we're ready to have a conversation. So I don't know if that answers your question, if you had a second part.
I think that's a good response. It makes sense. I was kind of wondering if there's an argument or a approach that you use to try to make people understand your perspective.
Ask them a multitude of questions about their perspective first to see why they understand it.
Okay.
Only then can you understand what the issue is that's preventing them from lawfully aligning their beliefs with reality.
Okay. One other quick question.
Sure,
I'm
man.
just curious if you agree with Sam Harris that it is strategically unproductive to refer to yourself as an atheist?
I do agree with him. I do agree with him, yeah. And I want to say something. Everybody, this is Dawkins, but we're all atheists about something. So I mean, everyone's an atheist about Zeus or Thor or, I don't know, the Norse pantheon. And there is no militant atheism. I mean, you're not militantly against Thor. If you're an atheist, so it's just a misnomer. It's a way to misconceptualize the problem. Thanks for your question.
I'm probably talking about a book that's older than you are, but not a whole lot.
Cool. What's your name?
Dorman.
Dorman? That's a cool name.
For me, the problem was dealing with the book's Childcraft. And
what? Excuse me, what book?
Childcraft. It's a series of 14 books that starts out with literature and proceeds to technology.
Okay.
The problem for me was understanding that the poetry was really subjective and only really intended to teach children language. So the problem is of moving from learning language to learning critical thinking.
I'm not sure what you're...
The question is, I would have stated it differently.
You're fine, you're fine.
Is moving from learning language to critical thinking. That to me seems to be the biggest part of the problem.
How does one move from learning a language to thinking critically in that language?
Thinking critically at all.
What do you think the relationship between learning a language is and critical thinking in the first place?
One does need to think before they can start coming to conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, learning a language is a necessary but not sufficient condition for thinking critically. So beyond that, I don't know if there's any relationship.
Well, to me, let's see here. The question is scientific study and observation measurements of energy and matter a sufficient beginning?
Beginning to what?
Understanding reality.
Whoa. Wow. No. Because no. End of answer. No. You would need more tools. You would need to have a way to evaluate the tools that you use and the processes that you use. And so when you talk about reality, reality is just, it's a complex word. Reality is pretty big. And to just reduce it to those three constructs or items, I would say no way, Jose.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Two more.
All right. Hi, my name's Robert.
Hi, Robert. Thanks for coming.
Okay. I may, in fact, be proving your prediction true, but I have a proposition of faith that I think is helpful. I believe that the world is rational, that it can be understood.
Why is that a proposition of faith?
Well, actually, I look at it despite the evidence.
You look at it despite the evidence?
I look at it despite the evidence, quite correct.
What do you mean?
Actually, my background is physics.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the general...
So we got one more. Just phrase your question, and then I'll try to answer it.
Quantum mechanics, general relativity.
Right.
They contradict themselves. You try to put the two together, they tell you completely nonsensical results.
Well, we're looking for a unified field theory. Who knows? I don't know. But I'm still not sure. What's your question? Maybe I'm not getting it. Just one sentence, so to help me understand what you want to say.
Essentially, I want to provide some sort of proposition and ask if you can see some way around it.
Okay, but that's a statement. What is your question?
The question is, I'm taking a piece of something on faith. To rephrase.
Okay, why don't you do this? Think about it. I'll catch him, and I want to make sure that we get in before we're good to go. And I'm going to stay around afterwards for about 20 or 25 minutes, and hopefully we can chat. So come up to me. This is the last talk. I'm going to be here hanging out. We have this room for a little while, and then we can talk. Hey, what's your name?
Well, we do have the ability to email Peter, so remember pgb@pdx.edu.
Hey.
Hi. My name's John, and my question relates to your definition of faith.
Yeah.
In your definition, it seems to discuss the idea of blind faith without discussing the idea of reasonable faith.
What is reasonable faith?
Yeah, so my question would be, I mean, in my mind, every day we make decisions of faith. For example, I flew on a plane a week ago. I can't guarantee I don't have full knowledge that this plane is going to get me to San Francisco, but based on my reason, I make a decision of faith that I think this will get me to San Francisco.
Why is that? That one example comes up. There are about 5 things that really anybody can say at a given time to this question. That is one of them. I chuckle to myself, the quantum mechanics is another one. Why is that a matter of faith? Don't you trust the process by which the plane was with the scientific process?
Well, I think it comes to a moment where I have to decide if I'm going to step on the plane or not. And in my mind, reason is involved with that. Maybe another example I think this relates is...
No, stick to the plane thing. Because it's important. Flying by... I'm not saying this for any other reason. It's true. Flying by plane is incredibly safe.
But I don't know for certain. I don't have evidence to prove that it will 100% get me.
No, but if you had that evidence, you wouldn't leave your room. You wouldn't do anything.
Which I think, requires faith to step out of our door every day.
See, that's... Why?
Well, maybe I'll phrase this a different way, from a different angle. In my mind, would you say that atheists also have faith? Because in my mind, if you look at the issue... I can't
speak for all atheists. I don't know. If you pick out an atheist, there's probably 20% of the people here. Ask them if they... Matt, you're an atheist. Do you have faith? Well, there you go.
Well, okay. My example for that is an atheist... I think an atheist would say God does not exist. A Christian would say that God does. So when it comes down to it, we look at the evidence. We may see the same evidence.
Great answer. Could you say that loud one more time? Could you say that loud? Can you go to the mic and say it if you don't mind? Go ahead, go to the mic. You're good. You're good.
I've yet to meet a fellow atheist, including Sam Harris and other people, that claim to know there's no God, myself included. I don't believe in God. I'm sure most people who are religious here don't believe in Zeus. I feel the same way about a divine Jesus or Easter Bunny. But I'm not saying there is no God. And I wouldn't fly on a faith-based airplane.
Thanks. All right. That you want one more shot?
I'll just speak with you.
All right. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks to the Portland State University Freethinkers. Thank you.